All right, this is the third and final example and video for section 11.5. In this one, we're going to be learning about margin of error, which is a way to get a more precise range for where our exact percentage is going to be for a survey or result of a sample. So in order to do that, let's go understand what the formula is to calculate margin of error. So what we get is when we have a random sample of size n, so what that's going to be is the number of people that take the survey or answer a poll. That's going to be the total sample size. So we're going to use n to represent that. When that's taken from a large population, we know that those results aren't 100% correct. The only way we would know that our results are 100% correct would be if we had everyone respond to a question. For example, if we were taking the results, the estimated results of a poll, like a presidential election, the only way we know the exact results is if we count up all the votes, and we could say for certainty that the results turned out the way they did by calculating the votes. However, that's not the way that we do things. We use a poll to go ahead and ask a large number of people, and then based on those results, we can say with certainty, based on using the margin of error, that our final results will land within that range. So what we do is our margin of error is going to be a percentage. And the way we calculate that percentage is we take 1 over the square root of the number of people in our sample. So remember, n is the sample size, and to calculate the margin of error, it's plus or minus 1 over the square root of that sample size. That's how we calculate the percentage of margin of error. Now, to actually get that margin, we get our results, p, so whatever result we got from our sample, and then we add and subtract our margin of error from that. So if p is our result from our sample, we take p minus our margin of error and p plus our margin of error to get our final range. And what we'd say is that our results are most likely going to fall within that range. So what that's going to do is it's going to give us a range of some value that our final results should land within that range. So it gives us a more precise estimation for what the final results of a survey or sample are going to be. So let's look at this problem right here. So we've got a survey where we're trying to figure out the Americans' main source of news. So here we have the results of our sample. So we surveyed 2,048 people from the US and found that 55% said that television is their main source of news. So if we look at this poll right here, 55% of the 2,048 said television was their main source of news. 21% said internet, 9% said other, 9% also said newspaper, and 6% said radio. Okay, so again, this was a sample of 2,048. The population would be all of the people in the United States. So the margin of error is going to give us an interval that's likely to contain the exact percentage of all people who use television as their main source. So two parts to this question. Let's first calculate the margin of error for this survey. And again, if you look in your journal, the margin of error is calculated by taking 1 over the square root of n, where n is the size of our sample. So let's look back here. So the size of our sample is 2,048. That's the number of people in the US that answered this survey question. So the formula we use to calculate the margin of error. So we're just going to take 1 over the square root of 2,048. And when we do that, we get plus or minus 1 over the square root of 2048, which you can use your calculator to find, and we get plus or minus 0.022. Now, if we put that in decimal form, we get 2.2%. Remember, we just move our decimal over 2 places, and we get plus or minus 2.2%. So again, this part's really simple. You just plug in your sample size into this formula, and then convert that decimal into a percentage. Okay, so that's part A. That's calculating the margin of error. Now, to get the interval, remember, we're just going to take our answer, our value that we got from our survey. We found that 55% of people in our sample said television is their main source of news. So to figure out our range, our interval that's likely to contain the exact percentage of people, we just take our result, which is 55%, and then we subtract 2.2%, and then we add 2.2%. So we're going to get a range of percent values. So let's go ahead and subtract 2.2%. So we get 52.8, and then add 2.2%. We get 57.2. So when we take those numbers, we get that our range is going to be between 52.8% and 57.2%. What that means is that it's likely that the exact percent of all people in the US who use television as their main source of news is between these two values, 52.8 and 57.2. Now, what you're going to notice is the larger this number gets, the smaller your margin of error is going to be. If this number was 100,000, you're going to get a very small margin of error. And when you subtract and add that to your actual result, you're going to get this range is going to be much smaller. The reason why is that the more people you sample, the more accurate it's going to be. The more likely that those survey results are in line with the actual results for our entire population. And conversely, the smaller that n gets, the larger this value is going to be, which means you're going to have a larger range. So that's why it's important to get a large survey so that you have a more accurate results and your margin of error is much smaller. So you have a result that's much more representative and in line with the actual population results. All right, now the example I want you to do is this right here. So in a survey of 2,680 people in the US, 34% that said movies are their main source of entertainment. So you need to calculate the margin of error and then give an interval that's likely to contain the exact percent. You're doing exactly the same thing that you just did in that sample. So if you have any questions, just go ahead and rewind it. I don't want to hear anybody say that you don't understand or you can't figure this out. It is literally the exact same problem that we just did with some of the values changed. So I really want to see you go back and rewatch that if you need a little extra help or have any questions. If you still can't figure it out, email me or message me. I'm not accepting any answers that say that you couldn't figure it out because all of the information is right here provided for you. Go ahead and enter your answers now. You should have two answers, the margin of error and then the interval.